Hello everyone. In my last video I mentioned that you should never store passwords in plain text on a server. Okay, you should never store it in plain text on any computer, but it includes the server, and I'm speaking to people who might be writing their own server. The reason for this is data breaches. They happen far too often. If you don't believe me, do a quick internet search for data breaches and you will find tons of them have been publicized, and you might even find some that have happened in the last few weeks or a few months. It usually might take a bit of time for them to discover the data breach and then tell people about it. And if somebody manages to break into the server and steal the username and password list, it's game over. They have access to everybody's user accounts and all that data. So what do? Because the server needs to somehow match the incoming username and password with the username and password of an account. And how you do that if you don't store the password like that? Oh, by the way, encrypting the passwords is a step up, but if somebody manages to steal the database and the encryption key, then they have still compromised all the accounts on the system. So you don't want to do that either. The real answer is cryptographic hashing functions. Now, a cryptographic hashing function is something that takes an incoming string and converts it to something of fixed length that uniquely represents the incoming data. And it has a few properties. First, that hash should be as unique as possible to the incoming password or incoming string. You don't have to only use it on passwords. There are other uses for it. So you want it to be as unique as possible. That means as few collisions, they call it, as possible. The other property, it needs to be one way. That means irreversible or practically irreversible. Infeasible for practical purposes, that's also good enough. Ideally, it would be impossible. So what you then do is you store the hash of the password on the server, and then when the user tries to log in, you take the password, you hash it with the same function, and compare it with the hash that you have stored. And if those two match, then you know it's the right password, and you can let the person into their account. So that way, you don't have the password on the server. There's no password to steal. And you just made it a lot harder for anybody who trying to compromise the system to gain access to people's user accounts. There's still a flaw in that one though, because let's say that you have quite a few people who have the same password. If you have just the hash by itself, then every account using the same password will have the same hash. And you can just glance down the list and say, oh, these user accounts have the same password. So if I can crack that password, I get access to all these accounts. The way around that is something called salting. So you add a random string to the end of the password before you hash it, and then you store the hash and the salt. And what that does is you've added a random bit to the password. So even if two or more people have the same password, the random string at the end is different, so the hash will be different. And you can safely, if somebody steals the username, password, and salt database, they still can't work backwards to get the original password, but now you can't glance down the list and see who's got the same password either. So that's current best practice. And if you're writing a server, I suggest you follow suit. You look up on the internet for what the current recommended hashing functions are to make sure you're using one that hasn't been compromised. Now you might be wondering, okay, so now I am safely storing, well, not storing passwords, but being able to log people in without storing passwords on the server. What about the client side? Well, on the client side, it's a completely different game, because you do need to be able to recover the password in order to send it to the server when you log in. It's a completely different game that I think is best left for another time. So that's it for now. I will see you next time.